already?
Yeah.
Good. Thank you for coming this morning. This year, we passed in South Australia the toughest and most comprehensive knife laws anywhere in the country. Earlier this year, our police had new powers to be able to declare things like shopping centres, public transport hubs, as precincts where they can use metal detection wands without reason to check for the possession of knives. Earlier this month, at the start of this month, the second tranche of laws came into effect, raising the age at which someone can buy a knife to 18, and importantly, declaring machetes and swords as prohibited weapons. That means it is illegal to possess, sell, manufacture machetes or swords in South Australia, unless you fall into one of the very narrow exemptions. The police declared a 3-month surrender period where South Australians could bring in their machetes or swords to any police station outside the CBD during their operating hours. In just 2 weeks already, we've seen nearly 500 weapons handed in. We've seen 130 swords, 230 machetes, as well as other prohibited weapons already handed in. We want to thank South Australians for heeding the call, for making sure there are less of these dangerous weapons out there in the community, and to make South Australia safer. I'll hand over to our Assistant Commissioner Fitzgerald, and then happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tony.
Can I just start off by thanking those members of the South Australian community who have taken the opportunity to surrender their machetes and swords and other prohibited weapons as part of this 3-month surrender period. They've listened to the message that has got out there from the government and from across the community to be able to take advantage, to be able to surrender their machetes and swords. Can I just restate the purpose of the surrender period? It gives opportunity for those people who have machetes and swords to be able to surrender those to any police station during operating hours, preferably not Grenfell Street and Hindley Street, but any other station, and to hand them over anonymously to the police so that they can be destroyed. The reason we're doing this is to make the South Australian community safer so that machetes and swords can't be used to harm others in the community. I'd just like to reflect really quickly on 2 incidents that have occurred, one in South Australia and one interstate. One, the South Australian one occurred at South Brighton on Friday afternoon. Police responded to reports of an affray between groups of youths. The reports said there was an imitation weapon and imitation firearm, and also machetes. Police, youth and street gangs followed up that investigation and subsequently arrested 5 people who will appear in court tomorrow. When they conducted the searches, it would be alleged that they located an imitation firearm and a number of machetes in the car that those people were in. This is exactly why these laws were brought into place, so that we can have the powers to be able to, first of all, search and locate and remove them from the community, but second of all, hold them to account. The second one, which I'll reference but not make any comment on, obviously, are the incidents that occurred in New South Wales. It's not appropriate for me to comment on that, but certainly the circumstances and the reporting of machetes involved obviously reflects as to why these laws are important. Those incidences, as well as the number of swords and machetes that have been brought in, brings into clear focus as to exactly why these laws are here and why it's really important for the members of the community who currently now possess machetes and swords that don't fit into one of those exemptions. Please come forward and surrender them to the police at your earliest opportunity.
Scott,
Thank you.
Just quickly, can I ask you, nearly 500, is that what was expected? Do you expect more? Do you expect less? Where does that number fall into?
Yeah, so 500, that nearly 500 number is certainly pleasing, but it is obviously there are more in the community. A number of people will have exemptions, but there were people there who are on the fence as to whether or not they think they should bring them in. My advice is bring it in and make the community safer.
Talk about that incident at South Brighton. Is these laws, how important are these laws in stopping youth crime, or is it machetes a problem across the board?
So there's two parts of that. So the first round of laws that were brought in that the attorney referenced spoke about the ability to be able to conduct searches of metal wand detectors. Part of that is for those people who have a conviction of over for 5 years or more for an offence of violence or possession, and a number of those people potentially would fit into that category to allow us to be able to conduct searches. The second part is to be able to remove the machetes and swords from the community when they're actually located, and the penalty, which is 2 years imprisonment or a $20,000 fine, reflects the seriousness in which we see machetes and swords.
So how long have we got? We're in this 3-month period. What's the actual end date of this?
So 30 September is sort of that period, but that exemption exists longer than that. What we're saying now is that bring them in and hand them in anonymously. After that 30 September period, you can still hand them in. There is still an exemption for the possession of a prohibited weapon to bring it into the police, but at that time we'll ask for your name and address and the details.
And how does it work? Can you bring it in at any time to any police station? Are there a certain time they need to bring it in? So
any operating hours that a police station is open, we ask that they are in a sheath, like many of them were brought in today, in sheathed or made safe in a way that when you bring it in, then it's obvious that you're bringing in an item as opposed to not. And it's during operating hours. We do ask though that they are not brought into Hindley Street and Grenfell Street where possible, because we don't want people walking through the CBD with prohibited weapons.
What happens to them now?
They'll be destroyed.
If you surrender a weapon after September and you get your name taken from you, do you get charged?
No. So there is an exemption to possess a prohibited weapon, and machetes and swords is now a prohibited weapon, and take that to the police station. So it's one of the legislated exemptions.
Okay, so that doesn't end?
No.
Hey G, I might just ask you, 500, is this a success, do you think, so far?
Absolutely so far. Yeah, these laws were brought in this year to make South Australians safer, and the fact that we've seen nearly 500 prohibited weapons handed in just 2 weeks shows that South Australians are heeding that call. Every single sword, every single machete that is not out in the public is one fewer opportunity for a crime to be committed with it.
Overall, is this the key to stopping a lot of violent crimes on our streets? Is this particular laws that will actually get the weapons away?
Absolutely. Not having dangerous weapons out in the community means there's no prospect that they can be used to commit a crime or in the wrong hands.
Do you think that a lot of people probably, I know some of these look pretty violent, but people might not even realise, the sort of dangers they might be keeping in their house that could be taken, nicked and used as a violent weapon? Yeah,
sure. People will have things that they might have had for many, many years in their possession, whether they be a machete or a sword that has been picked up as a souvenir or even a tourist type item. And that's why it's so important that people understand that these are now prohibited weapons. It is an offence to possess a machete or a sword in South Australia, carries up to 2 years in jail or a fine of $20,000. So people really should look at taking them in, particularly while there's this 3-month surrender period with 2.5 months to go, where it can be anonymously handed in to the police. But even after that, you can still take these in. You'll have to give your name and details, but you should consider taking them in as soon as possible.
We talk about the exemptions. What are those?
There are a number of exemptions for things like for educational purposes, historic purposes, genuine business needs. So there are a number of exemptions. And if people have any questions or queries on the South Australian Police's website under prohibited weapons, you can go and have a look at all those exemptions or seek some legal advice of your own.
What's the current status on selling these sort of items as well in shops and...
Yeah, it is. Prohibited weapons are illegal to possess. They're illegal to sell unless you fall into one of those very narrow exemptions.
Like machetes and things people might use for cutting trees or something like that.
Well, you've got to be a person who needs to use it for their work, for example, in those instances. So there are very, very narrow sets of exemptions for people to be able to have them. So as a general rule, illegal to sell, illegal to possess.
Do they have to prove that?
Yeah,
you can't just walk in and say I'm a forager and I can buy a machete.
You would, the person who buys a machete would have to fall in to one of those very narrow exemptions for it not to be illegal.
Just on a different topic, with regards to the algal bloom that are out today calling for a royal commission, is that something that you would support?
Well, I think that says everything you need to know about the Liberal Party in South Australia, that their number one priority is to call for the spending of millions of dollars on lawyers. We are keen to make sure we are doing everything we can to understand how this algal bloom is working. 80 of Australia's marine science experts gathered just in the last week in South Australia. There's a working group made up of the Environment Department, the Prime Industry Department, and the environmental regulator, the EPA, that is meeting regularly on this. We've already announced $500,000 in fee relief for the fishing industry, and we've said we're looking at doing more. So, we're keen to make sure we're having the best scientists look at what's happening and making sure that the funds are directed at those who are affected, not going to lawyers for a Royal Commission.
You talk about doing more. What does that mean? Is that you're giving yourself leeway to be able to invest more money or put more money towards this? And it's not a full stop.
Absolutely. We've seen with drought relief, we had an initial drought package and then tens of millions of dollars more for drought relief for our farmers. We've had an initial $500,000 towards fee relief, but we are looking at what more we can do to support the industry. And certainly the Prime Industry Minister and the Environment Minister are working very hard and talking to those affected across fishing, tourism and other industries.
And in doing more, a Royal Commission is not part of that plan?
Look, if the Liberals want to spend millions of dollars on lawyers, that's their business. We're keen to support industry and understand what's happening. And there's a certain irony that something that is almost universally accepted by scientists to be caused by climate change, when the South Australian Liberal Party, their state council, don't believe in climate change, they passed a motion against net zero. So you've got the most extreme major party in any state calling for a Royal Commission to perhaps just perpetuate their culture wars against climate change. It is not money well spent. We're keen to make sure industries affected are supported.
This toxin has been detected in places like the Coorong, all across the Metropolitan Coastline, and now in Port Lincoln. Is $500,000, that's going to be whittled away quite quickly.
And $500,000 was just an initial investment in making sure there were fee relief for those who were affected. As the Governor said, we are keen and we'll be looking to see what more we can do.
One of the presiding members of the Voice to Parliament is facing domestic violence charges. Will that affect her role on that board? Yeah,
obviously I won't talk about individual matters that are before the court, but I understand that the Voice themselves will be getting advice and looking into how that affects that. There are, of course, other members of Parliament who have other charges against them that they're innocent until proven guilty. So we'll leave that for the Voice themselves.
Back on the algal bloom, are we any closer to getting the crisis classified as a national crisis?
I know that the Prime Ministry Minister Claire Scriven and the Environment Minister Susan Close have both been working very closely with their federal colleagues to understand what help or support might be able to happen in that respect.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, guys.